You guys asked for it and we are delivering. This is the Surface Laptop 7 with the X Elite that beat out the M3 in a lot of tasks. So we are comparing it to the M3 Pro just like you guys asked. And not only are we gonna compare the actual laptops, the displays, speakers, everything about them, but we're gonna do a lot of performance tests, both benchmarks and real world tests. And both of these are at 100% battery life. So we are gonna compare that as well. So now let's go ahead and unplug both of them. And I have to say, I love that we have that Surface connector for charging. It's magnetic, just like MagSafe. And of course, you could still use the USB-C on both of them. Now, here are the full specs of each laptop. And you can see how great of a value this Surface Laptop 7 is, matching up the specs. Now, the MacBook is $2,000, but you can pick it up right now on Amazon for $1699. We'll link it down below. That is a killer value, but we'll see how they compare in the real world. Now, in terms of the quality and the design, both are made out of solid, really nice aluminum. This Surface laptop is really good. Size-wise, they are very similar. And as far as thickness, at the rear portion of the Surface, it's slightly thicker, but because of its wedge shape, just like the old school MacBooks, it's thinner at the front. The Surface is lighter at 3 pounds compared to 3.5. Both of these do have fans built in. And as far as the ports, the Surface has a USB Type A port, which is nice. Both have dual USB-Cs on the left-hand side, but the MacBook does have Thunderbolt, so it has a little bit more capabilities like daisy chaining and having better dock support, but the Surface does have fast USB 4. But the MacBook does have some extras on the right-hand side. We have a fast HDMI, we have another Thunderbolt, and an SD card reader, which is so nice to have built in. Now, as far as the keyboards, both of these are really nice. The Magic keyboards are great. The Surface also feels great. It has a nice tactile feel, but I prefer the slightly concave keys. Both are excellent though. And in terms of the trackpads, the Mac has a slightly larger one, but the Surface is also magnetic, so it's not a diving board design, and this is the best trackpad on any Windows laptop. It is excellent. Now on the Mac, you can see speaker grills on the left and right side of the keyboard, whereas they are hidden on the Surface. Now the Surface beat out the 13-inch MacBook Air in terms of speakers, so let's go ahead and compare it to the 14-inch that has a 6-speaker system. All right, you guys heard that for yourselves. The Mac in the 14-inch size is amazing. It's full, it's rich, and the bass hits so deep because of dedicated woofers. So if you're willing to spend a little bit more money on the 14-inch Pro Max, I mean, they are amazing. Now, as far as webcams, this is the 1080p webcam on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, along with their studio quality microphones, like Apple likes to name them. And this is the 1080p webcam on the Surface Laptop 7. The first thing that stands out is that it does give you a wider image. And I also can see dual microphones right on top of that screen. So you guys let me know which one looks better and which one sounds better down in the comment section below. Now the MacBook has Touch ID to log in, whereas the Surface has Windows Hello. Right there, it sees me, it logs me in, and even though the lid thickness is the same, Microsoft managed to put Windows Hello into this, but Apple, with a notch, did not. There's no excuse for not adding it in. Now, as far as the bezels, nice all around. Of course, we don't have that notch here. And comparing the displays, the MacBook does have more resolution. It's a little bit higher, but you can't really tell looking at them. Both look nice and sharp. And the MacBook does have ProMotion, and the Surface also has their own version. It goes up to 120 Hz. It could drop down to as low as 24 Hz to save battery power, so both are very nice. Now, one thing the Surface has that the Mac doesn't is a touchscreen display. So if you like to interact with touch, only the Surface can do that. Now, both these displays are rated at 600 nits native, but when you're watching HDR footage, the MacBook can go up to 1600. So looking back at this 4K HDR video, the highlights pop a lot more in some of these scenes than what you get on the Surface. Now, I'm also seeing much better contrast as well because the Mac has a mini LED display with a bunch of zones where the backlighting can be turned off, giving us nice deep blacks, and compared to the Surface where the blacks look a little bit gray even though it has really good anti-reflectivity coatings. Now, if you're watching something at night, particularly if you have a lot of contrast there, the difference is massive. The MacBook's highlights still pop like crazy, but you get those deep blacks, whereas with the LCD screen on the Surface, all the blacks look gray. You don't have the same super bright highlights, so the experience doesn't really even compare. The MacBook's display is so nice, but the only downside is if you're looking off axis or with crazy high contrast, you do notice some blooming. Now, it's also crazy to see the difference in anti-reflectivity coatings. The Surface is a lot more reflective, even though it beat out the regular M3 MacBook Air. The 14-inch MacBook Pro has really good anti-reflectivity coatings, so that's going to be great for using it outdoors. And of course, you can get the app that kicks up the brightness even more. And I want to remind you guys that we do have a big price difference here, but if you don't need the M3 Pro, for $1,400, you can get the regular M3 in this machine and have this amazing display. And now, as we get into performance, I want to give you an update on the battery life before we start hitting it hard. The MacBook is at 94% while we were doing all that shooting, whereas the Surface is already at 89%. So it is a little bit lower, but now we're gonna start pushing them and we'll see what happens. And now let's go ahead and compare the performance of the SSDs. Like I mentioned, both of these have 512GB SSDs, so it's an even playing field. All right, guys, look at this difference. The MacBook Pro with the M3 Pro is so fast. We have 64% difference in terms of performance, almost 6,000 here. Now the Surface is not bad, and in the write speeds, we have 4,600 compared to 2,500. That is an 84% difference, so the SSDs are clearly faster with this Mac. And now I have Geekbench 6 opened up. You guys see we have 18 gigs compared to 16, and we have a big difference in core counts. We have a 12 core compared to an 11 core because this M3 Pro is the binned version, but only 5 of those are performance cores with 6 efficiency, whereas on the X Elite, all 12 are actually performance cores, and we have higher frequencies too. Let's hit run on both of these, and I want to point out that the X Elite in the Surface Laptop 7 is an 80 SKU, which is not the highest, but out of all of the X Elite laptops we tested, it is actually the fastest on battery power. So props to Microsoft for giving us good performance whether we're plugged in or unplugged compared to other manufacturers that will limit it. And we do have this set to the best performance because that's what we're doing. All right, and here are the results, and it is so close. Even though this is the 80 SKU, it beat out the M3 Pro in multi-core. We have just under 14,000 compared to 14,263. And if we look at the single core, the Mac is faster by about 200 points. It's about a 6% difference, but the performance you're getting for the money with the Surface Laptop 7 on battery power is excellent. And I have Speedometer 3.0 opened up here, both using Chrome, and this is gonna give us an image of just how quick and snappy the web browsing performance is. And look at that, we have 37.7 compared to 28.4. 28.4 is very fast, but we have a difference of 33% in favor of the M3 Pro. And now I have the Figma app opened up here for web design. We'll see how it compares. This project right here is brought to us by 500 Designs, one of the best design studios in California. And I'm gonna just start out by testing out the smoothness. So let's go right over here. We have these high resolution images, and that is loaded up very quick, very snappy. Let's try another one right over here. So we have a couple seconds here, bam, it loaded up. Now let's try it on the Surface, and this is a touch screen. So here I can select, let me just zoom in this way. I'm gonna go to that same exact spot right here. That loaded up super quick, and the little image lower is higher resolution. So let's zoom in here. Wow, so that loaded up even quicker than it did on the Mac. And now I have 12 high resolution layers selected here. We're gonna export all of these and see how quick it is. All right guys, we are done. And I wanna mention that Figma is actually native for ARM, so it is not being emulated. So we are getting full performance. The Mac took 1:20, whereas the X Elite Surface took 1:51. So the Surface took 38% longer than our M3 Pro MacBook. And now let's take a look at graphics performance. Once again, this is the binned M3 Pro, and I have 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme Unlimited opened up. We are going to run this, and this game test is really optimized for these kinds of ARM chips and for mobile devices. All right guys, wow, what a difference here. We have 72.4 compared to 38.15. That is a difference of 90%. We have 90% higher on the M3 Pro, even the bin version. That is crazy. But now I wanna go and test the brand new Steel Nomad Lite. This is more of a AAA game title as far as performance testing. So let's run this. And look at this right here. My goodness, we have 37.6 compared to 14.44. That is 2.6 times better frames per second on the Mac. So if you are gonna be trying to play some games, I mean, the M3 Pro, even the bin, is so much faster. And now let's really push these chips to their limits with Cinebench. I'm gonna start the 10-minute throttling test. And on the Mac, we're able to see all our information. So right here, we're going just above 20 watts, 22 right there I saw at the peak. Unfortunately, with the X Elite, we don't have a lot of information. We have some temps and frequencies. So we saw a peak of 4,000 megahertz, 4 gigahertz, but it's only on 2 cores. And right now that we got started, we're running at about 3 gigahertz compared to 3.58. So this is clocking faster. Now, in terms of the temps, it did shoot up pretty quick as well. And of course, the fan is gonna spin up on here. On the Mac right now, we're averaging 88. 95 was the highest we hit, but of course the fans are speeding up. And as far as we know, the actual wattage running this test should be roughly the same, around 23 watts for the system. So it's gonna be a very interesting comparison. Now, one thing that's really stood out testing these chips is that now they're running at 2,500 megahertz across all of the cores, 27, and sometimes it even gets as low as 2,200, even though the temperatures are fairly low. I hear the cooling system running right now, and it seems almost as if the chip is just being limited by the amount of power that it can have, and because it doesn't get enough wattage, the clock speeds have to drop, and that is just so weird compared to Intel systems and other Macs where typically we're limited by heat. And this is likely because this chip was originally designed for servers at much higher wattages with cooling, but they were able to package it down into an efficient, underclocked mobile chip. And now it's been around 5.5 minutes. The fans are all sped up, everything's stabilized, and the Surface Laptop 7 is running a little bit cooler than the MacBook, but also a little bit louder. The MacBook has a hum just slightly above ambient. And now I have my thermal cam here, so let's take a look. We're getting 39 degrees or so, the hottest part of the M3 MacBook Pro. You guys can see the dual fans right over there. And let's take a look at the Surface. 46 there at the hottest part. And then we have the heat going to one corner. I think this thing has just a single fan, but we've noticed that these laptops, the chip itself is consistently pretty dang hot, even with fans. And as this is finishing up, I want to mention that even though the fan is louder on the surface, with all of these X Elite laptops, none of them are crazy loud, and you never have a thing where you open up a web browser or you're starting up your machine or maybe installing an app and the fans are just ramping up and down. So they've been designed really well, and with this kind of a characteristic, it's much more like a Mac, and it seems like they're okay with the chip maybe getting a little bit hotter or more based off of chassis temperature and keeping the fans from going crazy and blaring like you would get on Intel laptops, and that just gets really annoying. So this is much more like a MacBook. All right, guys, we have our scores, and we have 881 for the Bind M3 Pro and 836 for this X Elite. So that's only a difference of about 6% between the two machines. And now I have Blender opened up right here. We're gonna do the classic BMW test. And right here on the X Elite in the settings, I wanna show you guys that none of these technologies are supported for the X Elite. So we're gonna have to do the basic CPU rendering, whereas on the Mac, you have Metal, and it does work really quickly. So now let's go ahead and render this. All right, guys, we have our times here. The MacBook took 21 seconds compared to, get this, 4 minutes and 41 seconds for the X Elite. Now, of course, we're not able to use graphics for compute. It's not supported, and that time with CPU is not quick. And on the Mac, on the other hand, it even has ray tracing built into the chip, which the X Elite does not, so it flies through 3D rendering. So this machine is definitely not for that. And just to prove the point, I went ahead and I ran the same render using CPU only on the MacBook, so we're not using graphics or ray tracing, and it took 2 minutes and 42 seconds compared to that 4:41. So the X Elite, it was faster in Geekbench, it was almost as fast in Cinebench, but here, instead of having 6% difference in Cinebench, we have a difference of 73%. It took 73% longer than the Mac. So that is just crazy. Now, of course, this is also emulated running Blender here, but typically we saw like a 10% hit in performance for emulated applications. But this just shows you the real world scenarios where you can run an app that might not be optimized, and then the chip doesn't do a great job for this specific task as well. You can have a big difference in performance. And now let's get into some other creative apps. I have Adobe Lightroom Classic opened up right here. We've tested it a couple times in previous videos, and it actually works quite fast, even though it's emulated. Now, before we export these 50 edited high resolution images, I wanna do a couple of things that a lot of people are using, and this is what's gonna use the NPU. So we have, let's go with the sky first. I'm gonna click it at the same time. So right there on the Mac, definitely a lot quicker, probably twice as fast or 3 times faster. Let's go ahead and add another one here. We'll use the AI to select the subject. Bam, done on the Mac almost instantly. Here it is looking. Bam, once again, that is roughly 3 times quicker, almost instant compared to sitting and waiting. Now I'm gonna just flip through some of these images here, and switching through is still pretty quick, even though this does have to use emulation. Now, regular Lightroom, the mobile web kind of based one for cloud, that is optimized, it's written for ARM, but some of these other programs, if you like to use classic, like a lot of professional photographers like, well, it is gonna be a little bit of a wait for all these apps to get optimized and set up. And now let's go ahead and export all 50 of these. So the MacBook took 43 seconds to do this, whereas the X Elite took 1 minute and 38 seconds. It took more than twice as long. Now in Lightroom, the mobile version, like I said, it is quicker, but it is still nowhere near the speed of the MacBook Pro. And now let's test something that is fully optimized. This is DaVinci Resolve, and we have the new version released for Windows ARM. This can actually use the GPU to its full capability, so there's no excuses here. And this is a 4K Blackmagic RAW file with denoising. So we're gonna test out the compute performance of the graphics, and let's just go ahead and run this. It is really tough. It's gonna give us a frame rate and we'll see what this thing can handle. Now on the MacBook, it's already playing. We're getting 9 to 10 frames per second. So that is pretty good for this binned chip. And on the X Elite, it was glitching up and now started running. We're getting 0, 1, 2 frames per second, back to 1 frame per second, back to 2. So as far as the graphics compute performance, this is 5x the performance on the MacBook. That is crazy. You could see right there, the graphics is at 98, 99%, 100. It is fully optimized, but that's the performance we're getting. All right, let's try some playback. Here's some Blackmagic RAW footage with a LUT applied, and we're just gonna see how smoothly this plays. On the Mac, perfectly smooth, 23.97 frames per second. It has a lot of overhead for extra effects or layers. Here, we had stuttering. We still see stuttering right here. It's not able to play this back, even though it's fully optimized. I'm not seeing really the frame rate. I can go into the color tab here and it'll give me an actual frame rate for it. So we're playing back at 12 frames per second instead of 24. So this thing's maxed out. And it looks like our energy saver just kicked in. So we got low enough that it decided, hey, let's cut down the performance. That's at 19%. Interesting. Let's go ahead and turn this off. And you guys can see our graphics is pretty much maxed out here, and we're not getting good performance. Whereas on the Mac, right now we're at 47% graphics usage with perfect playback, 46% right there. You basically have 4x the performance in terms of graphics compute, 5x. Wow. This is standard 4K footage with a little bit of effects applied. And this should be pretty easy because you have hardware decoders. We're gonna have hardware encoders. This is like the optimal scenario. As you guys see, they are both playing back perfectly. So it is handling your basic simple footage. So that part of it at least is good. You're not gonna be able to stack a ton of effects or do some real serious work, but for basic 4K, it is playing it back. And now let's render this 5-minute project, and this is gonna test out the speed of the built-in encoders. Apple, they haven't updated it from the M1, the M2, and now the M3. This is the new X Elite, and it looks like we're running at about 29.5, about 30 FPS, compared to about 90 on the MacBook with really old encoders. I believe for the M4, they finally have updated it once M4 Max launch, but let's see how long this takes. The MacBook's been done for a while here, and looking at the X Elite, our graphics is maxed out. The 3D engine is roughly half or so for the effects, but the decode is what is maxing this out right here. All right, guys, we have 1 minute and 21 compared to 4 minutes and 12 seconds. So the MacBook is 3 times faster in these very simple 4K video tasks, and up to 6 times faster for more complex things. That is a crazy difference that I was not expecting. Now, I wanna do a quick test on this plugged in just to see if we have a difference. But first, I wanna go ahead and take a look at our battery life. We turned off that energy mode as soon as it kicked on when we were doing the previous test. So our MacBook here is at 25% battery life remaining. We've been shooting for hours and hours doing all of these tests. And the Surface is at 7% battery life. So this is still good as far as if you're comparing to the older Intel-based systems, but the MacBook is ahead in terms of overall efficiency, speed in the real world, and battery life when you're pushing it. Let's go ahead and plug in this system. And as you guys can see, it's showing 4 minutes, 5 seconds, 4, 3. It usually jumps up and down. So that's showing us that it's still gonna take the same time. We were not limited by any sort of on battery performance, any sort of caps, or even the battery life being low. That is just the performance that you get. So what is our main conclusion? What did we find in these tests? You guys wanted the X Elite against the M3 Pro. We did it, and we saw that in pretty much everything, the 14-inch with the binned, weaker M3 Pro ended up beating it out. The only thing it didn't is multi-core in Geekbench 6, but that was literally a 1% difference. But in all the real-world tasks, unoptimized or optimized, the 14-inch is a better machine. Now, if you're willing to spend a little bit more money than this Surface Laptop 7, you are getting a better machine. You're getting the speakers, the mini LED display, you're getting the better ports, you're getting better battery life. And in terms of real world performance, especially for creative tasks, especially for graphics and graphics tasks for compute performance, the difference is really big. And with that said, with the regular M3 in this machine, even though some of the benchmarks would have been lower, the real world performance tasks would have still beat it out in terms of, Blender, in terms of the Figma, in terms of video editing. It is still faster on that. So we still really like the Surface Laptop 7 with the X Elite. If you need a Windows system, we love this machine. It is a great value. You get way better battery life than you did with Intel. It's nice, it's a good machine. And if you use it for regular office tasks, use it for web browsing, emails, CPU related tasks, you want a nice screen, webcam, it is a good machine, but it is not a powerhouse for creatives or for graphics. The MacBook still wins, and thankfully with those killer sales, you can pick one up for a great price. But you guys let me know what you thought down in the comments section below. Go ahead and click that circle above because we still have some great videos coming out. Check out one of those videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next one.